My name is David Muñoz. By profession, I'm an investment banker. Have been for probably about 35, going on 36 years now. Semi-retired as of pre-COVID, and my career spanned large regional banks, brokerage firms like Merrill Lynch, boutique firms, and right now I'm basically doing consulting for small companies who are looking to raise private equity. Very small companies that fall below the radar of less than 10 million in raises, which no one wants to touch. So kind of had done a lot of things in the industry over the years. That's how I first met Tony. Actually, I do remember meeting Tony when he started graduate school, which he talked about in his interview that I watched with you. He actually came to my office a number of times while he was in grad school, and he went to the Case Weatherhead School. And the owner's son, one of the owners, there were three owners in a small boutique I worked for about 13 years. One of the owners had a son who was working with us, and he was mostly going to school. And he was a classmate of Tony's in the same graduate program that Tony was in. And they come to study after hours, and that's the first time I remember meeting Tony. Before he'd gotten into real estate, probably wasn't sure what he was going to do. And then just kind of knew him from there. It was probably at least another 7 or 8 years before I ran across him. Again, although I always knew he was in Cleveland doing things downtown. And I actually had gotten to the point where I was working with National City Bank, and I was also doing my own private real estate transactions. And I had a deal going where I was about to buy the Cleveland Athletic Club, the old Cleveland Athletic Club, which is now a rehab apartment building called the Athletic. And Tony real estate office was inside on the fifth floor of this 15-story building. He was also a member of the club. I was a member of the club. That's how we really got to know each other on a very social basis. And even by then, his real estate company had been thriving. They had very funky offices on the fifth floor. It's exactly how he described it. They were very non-traditional, and he let people pursue those things in real estate that were near and dear to their hearts, and he would support that. And that helped him build really good team members. So at that point, while I was trying to acquire the Cleveland Athletic Club building and also take over the club itself, they were two separate entities. Tony was helpful in just sort of, not so much the financial side of it, because I had that under control, but just sort of the public relations and how to deal with the 1,000+ members who would they be happy that a member was buying a over 100-year-old social athletic club. And so he was helpful in that regard. We got to be much better friends at that point. I had already acquired a couple of other, independent of Tony, just on my own, apartment buildings. And I continued to do that while I worked for the old National City Bank. All of this sort of leads up to that real estate financial meltdown in 2008. I left the bank and was not really happy with what was going on there. And Tony and I would talk about what was going on in real estate at the time. And I actually exited two biggest properties that I had at the time. And then the athletic club deal on its own sort of fell apart. And I remember Tony saying, you know what, it's probably for the best, because it looks like there's just going to be some tough times in real estate for a while. And that's really when sort of things got worse. I forget the year of his indictment when the FBI showed up. By that time, he and I had gotten to be very close friends. Everyone on the street downtown who knew him was shocked that this was going on. And you know, that's where for you kind of up, because once that happened, and again, I was glad to get that refresher listening to him talk about how all of this sort of played out, because I was there watching it unfold. And it's exactly the way he says it was. It was sort of a slow grind with nothing really happening. And then when the conviction finally happened, it was not that reality was setting in so much, but it was like a brick in the face of, oh no, this is a new reality. There was no setting in. All of a sudden, it was this totally different thing that I believe no one expected to happen to him. So, strong personal relationship with him over those years. Prior to the, let's say the ground zero was the FBI raiding the office. Relationship was based on mutual respect for seeing how he ran his business and him and me his area of expertise, which is primarily investments and investment banking, and then just enjoying each other's company. He very much enjoyed having people around, and never saw Tony drunk ever. It's kind of like the old Dean Martin thing, where he's always holding a glass, and everybody thought that Dean Martin was always soused. And years later, you come to find out that that was apple juice in his glass, wherever he was, because he was entertaining people, and it was funny because that's how I saw Tony, and he just liked to have people around, and I was at a lot of the events, and he described the fundraising that was going on. I participated in that. I had an art show. I paint. I've been painting for 20 years, and I had an art event at AJ Rocco's where he would hold a lot of his events. And the very last event that he did at all was a combination of him having people come in and my having my art event. And we were there till 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think it was the day that he probably raised, event-wise, the most money for his legal defense. And so that was for Jay Milano. And I don't know if you've had a chance to, do the history on lawyer Jay Milano. I don't know if he's even still alive. I think he is. I don't know that he's practicing if he is still alive. But it was just money down a rat hole, because the guy literally did nothing for Tony, other than here's another legal bill for you. So he was constantly trying to raise money to pay that guy, not so much getting any kind of real defense out of it. But that's how I knew him, and that's how I was able to be close to everything that was unfolding for him in those particular years, right up until the second trial, where he was already in jail, and my contact with him was through other people, because he couldn't have a lot of contact. But that was the trial where I was able to actually be a witness on his behalf, character witness, really, because I couldn't speak to the activities that were being alleged directly. I was supposed to be on the federal side of it, but just never got called. And I think that's because of Jay Milano. Jay just, I think he presented as little as possible in Tony's defense very quickly. A couple of months, but The prosecution had more time to mount their arguments, and Jay Milano found very little ways to create opportunity to tell his story. And really, I think Milano just, like a lot of people, in spite of the fact that he's an attorney, I think he just didn't understand the case. The case and the way he talked about this case is not about who said. I always said this case
was just the idea. Oh, I was saying that I had already had gotten a taste of how aggressive regional banks, not national banks per se, but just regional banks, and back in the day, like National City, which obviously went under because of these very problems. And we had folks coming from the Florida office to Cleveland because we were the private client group. They were so hungry to do loans that they were coming into the office, and this is not how people talk to a very staid and musty private client group. We talk to our clients about, oh, maybe your portfolio will grow 8 to 10% a year, and maybe you'll have some down years. These guys were coming in bragging about how real estate in less than 6 months was going up 30, 40, 50%. And that our clients, which were technically also their clients, they would say, because we're all the same bank, we should be referring our clients to the mortgage department for loans. And we all kind of looked at each other, and this was like 2005. There are guys that I knew that they still talk about it as being like, boy, that was a red flag for us. And I'm sure it was happening all over the country. So it was very bizarre that this was the legal tactic that the prosecution was taking, because we were all people in investment and in banking all looked at Tony, who knew Tony, and said, they're accusing you of what? You convinced the bank to do this? You're the middleman. You bring Mr. Buyer and Mrs. Seller together, and whatever they. Mhm. Right. So that's also very important, because they said that he stole over $40 million. And so where's that money? Where did that money go? You have to be able to trace payments, and no one was showing up with bags of cash, because as greedy and corrupt as the high levels of mortgage offices were, it was mostly greedy and less about corruption. If the federal government is telling HUD that they should reduce their requirements for subprime lenders and sort of invite a huge percentage of what normally, historically, for decades have been ineligible borrowers. It's sad, but some people should not be borrowing money. If you've convinced these people that you should own a home, that everyone in this country should be a homeowner, and you remove every barrier and every sort of aspect of self responsibility for signing on the bottom of that loan and getting the money, then of course everyone's going to rush for that and buy the house. And all the gimmicks that mortgage companies did, and at every level, about, okay, well, we told them that this was a 2.5-3% loan, and it's a 30-year mortgage, but we're not going to tell them that in 6 months it's going to jump to 6, 7, 8%. And all of a sudden, the monthly payment is 3 times what they thought it would be. Even worse for the person who decided that they were going to buy 5, 6, 7, even 10 properties and rent them, or even worse, the guy who thought, I'll buy it, do nothing, and flip it in a month. Were there people that made money doing that? Yes, it's just like the stock market. You can buy one day, sell the next day, and you got out in time. You're leaving someone else holding the bag, as it were. But in real estate, the transactions were normally took longer. They even reduced the title time, the what was required to verify. He talked about it to verify to the lender. Oh, does that house actually exist? They used to send an appraiser, their own appraiser out. Appraisers, people were becoming appraisers who had no business being appraisers. So all you put all that together, this swirling mass of financial activity, and there's all these levels of revenue generation because some mortgage brokers, uh, the way they made their money was teeing up a loan for a bank, and the bank would say, "Well, you're a mortgage broker. You're between us and the home buyer or the real estate investor." Suddenly, everyone's a real estate investor. So for every loan that you bring us, we'll give you $500. Well, $500 doesn't sound like a lot, but if this mortgage broker is suddenly doing hundreds and hundreds of loans that he's passing over to the bank, then he's profited off of bringing unsuitable borrowers to the bank's desk. But again, it's the bank's opportunity to say, you know what, we're gonna pay you that 500 per head that you brought us, but we're gonna probably not do loans on 60-70% of these people. They just don't qualify. No, that didn't happen. They did the loan because HUD was guaranteeing to the banks, if you do the loan, we'll back it. So everyone's involved. And if you look at it from that angle, you have to really step far back and really understand not just the real estate business, but how capital works. And a lot of people don't. A lot of attorneys haven't a clue of how these things work. And if you can step back and have that point of view, you suddenly realize uh, Tony's just caught up in this. If you said it's true that if in fact he was bringing unsuitable borrowers to the bank, and the bank was paying him, and so that was his part of the greed. But nobody was paying him to bring people. He was trying to get houses sold. So that's how I saw it early on. I think after a while, when after he got convicted, I went through a sort of thing where I was thinking, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I don't understand how this works. Maybe there's something that he ended up doing that shouldn't have been doing. It's so easy. The way interstate fraud laws are, you use a fax machine and now an email, and now even a text. If you send a text to someone out of state and you induce them, or you create you perpetrate some sort of fraud that causes them to lose money, that text is fair play for evidence to convict you. And then what they do is they put that under the category of the legislation of wire fraud, because you used FCC communications to commit this fraud. So never mind what it is that you actually are being accused of doing. We're going to tack on. There's another penalty for abusing, this wonderful FCC system of communicating with each other that we have, and so that's kind of like a separate charge, all on its own. And if you only got a couple of years for the actual charge, oh, they're going to get you 10 years on the wire fraud. And then wire fraud plays right into racketeering, because now if it's being described that you're doing these things many times over to many different people, and there's more than three people in a room who are, he's having a business meeting, he's having a sales and marketing meeting, probably very innocently saying, hey, you know what? These are the flyers that National City gave us, and it says no income verification, no assets required. You can be a homeowner today. Okay. So now they can use that against him and say, well, you were operating in a racketeering type mode by doing that, and so now it becomes not you're the lead on a big machine that's just ripping people off, and so that buildup took took months and months, and they were very smart at the federal level on how they did it, and then it flipped, and it's true because when uh, he took the approach that he said Don recommended, and I didn't even until he said that I didn't know. I thought he came up with that idea. And when I would talk to him, and I would talk to John Caputo, it was actually John that uh, was able to speak with him most directly, and I think it was because Judge Gall recognized that John was the outside person that Tony needed and allowed that. And then John would come back and he would tell people, this is what's going on. This is what he needs. Can you do this? Can you do that? Um, I thought it was Tony's idea, but he says, no, this is Don. And it made perfect sense because it took away all the complexity, just sort of just falls away. And even what's the guy's name again? Casares. Okay, he even tried it with me on the stand, and I already knew. He tried to. Uh, he made the mistake of asking. I was surprised that he asked me open-ended questions. Uh, and because he would make a statement like, and he was trying to my first statement. He wanted to have the jury see that this thing is really complicated, and Tony can bring whoever he wants in here, and they don't understand it. The only people who understand what's going on here is the prosecution. And oh boy, is this complicated. And you jurors are going to be so sick of hearing this that your eyes are going to roll over in your head, and you're just going to say, let's convict this guy like they did at the federal trial. So his questions, now that when I think about it, instead of saying, well, he said to me, you're not an investment professional. I thought, wow. I just looked at the judge and I said, can I talk about my background? And judge is like, yeah, he asked you. He's making a statement about. He's making a declarative statement about who I am and what I do for a living. So I got to lay everything out there. What he should have said was, you're not a real estate person. I would have, if I would have had to say, no, I'm not. And then if I tried to explain you see this all the time, just yes or no. Okay. Just yes or no. You're not a real estate person. No, no, I'm not. So you don't really know how these things work. And honestly, if you ask the question in a certain way, very directly, I thought this. I thought, this guy is smart. I'm going to be of little help to him. But he let me talk about the things that I knew and compare them to the things that Tony did. And I said, well, I know that Tony is a real estate broker, and he puts buyers and sellers together. He doesn't make loans. He doesn't, and then at one point he did say, he objected, and the judge told me to stop. But the jury had already had a chance to hear those things that Dawn was saying. This is what matters. And instead, in the federal trial, uh, all you got to hear about was how complicated this was, and how Weasley and backroom agreements, and people are like, we're gonna rip them off, and they're not gonna know what hit them, and we'll be in and out before you know it. Yeah, that stuff is very dramatic, and a little titillating, but it doesn't address the question. And he put it best. Were the banks forced to do something that they themselves were not promoting? And the answer was no. And I'm sure that that state jury saw that. And I'm trying to remember. I think I testified somewhere midway between Dawn was still alive. That didn't happen until, because that would have blown me away. And as I remember it, her life ending the way it did happened maybe as much as a week after I had testified, because she just as he described it, she was going to be the nail in the coffin that apparently he didn't need, and it it worked out completely the opposite. So Casares was very, and I'd known about him before. Again, one of these guys who uh, there was an arrogance that comes with the position that he had. Uh, to hear Tony talk about, how he treated Dawn is probably how he treated a lot of women. I know more female attorneys than I know male attorneys, and almost I'd say all the female attorneys that I know, they're all tough cookies, and I'm pretty sure that he couldn't get away with that with a peer, an actual attorney. So that's how he treated staff and younger people, which is, in the new world that we live in, you start to see things differently, and you're like, oh, that's almost predatory, and controlling, and there's a certain vindictiveness there. So I'm not surprised that that was part of the picture. But the way the case, uh, the way he and Tony managed the case, obviously with Dawn's help, and the way she directed that the exhibits should be, and those I did see a few of those, and again, it struck me as, yes, yes, this is what we should be talking about. So it worked, uh, and again, we all felt, everyone who knew him, knows him, thought, wow, this should, at least start an inquiry, uh, with her death and all these other things that are happening, an inquiry with Nugent into his trial, the first trial, and just shocked that it never happened, shocked that it never happened. And so there's a lot of the protecting that's going on, I think, is self-protection. Nugent is not interested in being shown that Casares exposed him, and that things should have been handled differently. With the destroyed, I shouldn't say lost. They said the computers were lost. I'm sure they destroyed the computers. Um, that sort of thing going on. The attempt to record him, and I know Tony said there's recordings, but those were probably destroyed. I don't know how those are ever going to be found. Yeah, yeah. Um, Probably John Caputo, I would say. But yeah, they knew her. They knew because they knew she was well known in that building. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, she sounds like an incredible person, and I did meet her at a couple of those events, and just very cheerful and happy. And who knows? she might have been those early events. She might have already been wired. I don't know. I don't know when that stopped. Clearly, she was smart enough to know that that wasn't kosher, and I'm sure that that's like as Tony said, that's a big part of what was eating away at her. I think in the end, the threatening, and it's not surprising because listen, when someone is in fear for their livelihood and their reputation, and I'm sure that he already, Casares already knew that this trial was not going well for him, and that Gall was allowing things to be introduced into the record that never would have flown with Nugent. I'm sure he was getting worried, and I think I mentioned to you that my girlfriend at the time, she said, people in this building are really talking about your friend Tony. And I said, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? She said, no, she said they're really impressed with the way he's handling it. And so Casares, I'm sure, had to know that this, I mean, he's well educated, but he's not a lawyer. His father was a lawyer, but you don't, inherit that ability. And so his training at Georgetown and at Case and just his general brightness and with Dawn's help allowed him to really just uh, do what he had to do, and it was that in itself. Uh, the comments that my ex girlfriend would tell me, she'd say, people talk about this. They once they got clued in of what was going on at that trial, whenever the trial actually was ongoing and they were in session, people wanted to know what happened afterwards. And Casares had to have known that people were talking about him. And I guess like with anybody else, someone like him, the people that liked him, fine, they liked him, and maybe for other reasons. But a lot of people just didn't like him, and a lot of people didn't care for him, but didn't have to work with him, so it didn't really matter. But those are the people that would have said, "Yeah, that guy," And so that in itself was embarrassing. So I'm not surprised that as things were coming to the hour that Dawn was supposed to be uh, giving her testimony, and that they withheld her name till the very end from that list. I'm sure that shook them up, and I'm sure that idea of, hey, you better not show up. You should leave town. And it's true. Whatever ended up taking her life, whatever fears and demons were induced in her because of that, and obviously alcohol plays a part. It's too late to find out unless somebody who did it or who was part of those threats confesses it and says, "Yeah, I can't live with this anymore. We really did scare the shit out of her." And to the point where she wasn't going to leave, and because in her mind it sounds like her life was destroyed either way, and so yeah, just leave. Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, they had her in a no-win situation. They wanted her for their benefit to commit a crime against the court. At the very least, doing that. They take that seriously, and judges are like, you can't disrespect this court by ignoring that, and so you're going to get whatever punishment. And but it's compounded by the fact that it's like, well, either you do that, or if you do show up, like you just said, we're going to throw everything at you, and everything at you, your mind starts to reel because you're young and you don't know, and we know today that uh, whistleblowers even now still go through things, really, really difficult things, because there's a lot of gray area. And even if there isn't gray area, when the resources of a private corporation, look at the best example today in the private world is what Facebook does to employees who talk too much about what they're doing, uh, that things that are might be harmful to teenagers and or just in general, promoting like the January 6th event that some people say, well, Facebook had a hand in letting that happen. And if you work for Facebook and you talk about it and you're thinking these people will sue me to the grave, and you can't fight it. And so the same thing goes when the federal, the county, the state government is telling you, oh, we're not going to forget this, and that's I'm sure all of that is what played into her last moments, and it is really sad. Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Was brought in. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it really should be. And at this point, it's the investigation has to focus on people in that office who had a motive to exert those kinds of threats on her, because other than that, and you can rule out a lot of things like, well, where were other friends? Did someone come by and say, hey, Don, I got two big jugs of vodka, let's do shots, and then leave. But there's ways to rule that out, and it takes digging to do that. Anyway, so that's I'm trying to think here. What are there, the list of questions? I don't have it in front of me right now. Is there anything else there that I can zero in on for you? Oh yeah, mostly in a very, very lazy fashion, that they took the talking points that the prosecutors wanted them to have, and they sort of, USA Today, that style of USA Today bullet points, and here's what's going on, and then very, maybe a statement of fact, of a statement that Tony might have issued. Well, I'm innocent and I'm going to fight this vigorously. That's always that way at the bottom of an article. But the way the plain dealer, and let's stick with that's just the plain dealer really. the way the Plain Dealer, as far as print goes, handled it. They would focus on the abandoned apartments, the people who were quote unquote losing their homes. Um, Tony, there's a statistic that Tony threw out one time to me years ago that the houses that were listed in the indictment, both federal and then in the state, and in the state they dug up more properties. They just threw. Casares wanted to throw. he wanted the same. They went with the same counts and then added like a dozen more. And just thinking, I'm going to bury him. Most of those houses had worked out fine. After see what happens is when suddenly a lot of people are not paying, can't make their payments. There are people who can make payments who are like, well, I'm not going to make my payments either, you know, and let's take advantage of this for a while. And then the banks, are overwhelmed, and they're feeling the pinch immediately. Listen, it's not something that I would a well-run bank like Third Federal Savings and the Stefanski family didn't have a single problem through all this. They never changed what they want. They normally want 30% down. They help people in the communities that they serve understand how it's in their best interest to have real equity, and then to not turn around and say, "Let me get an equity line." Okay, you just bought a house with 15% down, and somehow you managed to walk away with a 10 or 12% of that remaining equity in a pile of cash or a credit card or an equity line. And so now you've screwed yourself. So the way the media presented it was, let's look at all these people that are having all these troubles, let's go to the who are the bad actors. Never once did the Plain Dealer ever say, boy, these banks, I wonder why these banks were allowing this to happen. They never did it. The business reporter for the Plain Dealer, I forget her name, was one of the worst reporters. I wouldn't even call her a reporter. She's just somebody who wrote copy for the Plain Dealer. She, Pretty much. She would I was for like 2 years. I was president of the CFA Society of Cleveland, so the Securities Analyst Society, and this was while I was at National City Bank, and this society has been around now probably going on 70 years. But when I was doing it, and they still do this, every week we'd have a luncheon and we'd invite a public company to come and talk about their financials. And depending on how interesting the company was, sometimes, we'd have 10 people show up for lunch. The most we ever had was 400 when at the time the CEO of Cedar Point, the company's Cedar Fair, came. So like 400 people came at a restaurant where we did it every week in the old Huntington building on 9th and Euclid on the top floor. Big, beautiful ballroom. And so we always had our meetings there. She always had a standing invitation to come, and I would say to her, and I didn't start this. I remember when I took over, they said, always remember to send her an invitation and that the lunch is comped. I mean, it was just rubber chicken, but she should come and she can do a story maybe on the society. She can, if the company is of interest, because whenever and it was usually a CFO, and CEOs of the bigger companies couldn't always make it, but they always sent somebody from the C-suite, and it was generally the CFO and the investor relations person. So the IR person always would have been happy to meet with a journalist from the Plain Dealer, and and she never came. She never came. And it was just like, here's an easy story. Even if you're just like, even if you're looking, oh, what am I going to write about next week? You know, never did it. And I would read her articles, and wow, it's like, oh, lady, you got that wrong. You got this wrong. And really, once the plain dealer started its decline in the late '80s, I don't think they ever had more than one person uh, uh, on the financial beat. Okay, and and then they would have a guest column from someone in my world in the industry, and that was just like a free chance to advertise their investment services. So there was no surprise to me that they covered it in a very lax way. They didn't ask questions. They still don't ask questions. Uh, the television media is worse than the print media. I don't know if you ever noticed this, but um, I don't think any of these people on the TV stations actually go out and get news anymore. They rely on the internet to tell them what's going on. If you flip quickly through stories, whenever they get around to doing national news, you hear the same thing from everybody, and it's because and it's the same phrasing, because yeah, yeah, and right, yeah. Well, the whole idea of what came out of best example, University of Chicago and their journalism school. And I mean, and there's journalism schools all over the country now, because well, why not? That's a great way to have your school make money, because oh, we have a journalism school, and they're all terrible. But so right. Oh, absolutely, and that requires a sensitivity coupled with a real desire to say, uh, is there a way to get more out of this news wise, information wise, solve the mystery wise, that from that aspect, and you have to really care about it. And these people in local news don't care. And you're right. And I don't want to put, it's not all on them. They choose. They make their videotapes. They send them to the stations. They have to look, telegenic. They have to be well spoken. They have to. You ever watch them when the women are especially good at this. They can flip from a sorrowful moment and then brighten up like the people who are reading the news. They don't gather the news. They don't research the news. They're just good at reading the news, and that's fine. But my gosh, in that whole sort of department, uh, can't maybe have one or two people who really, this is your job to go and say it, call it for what it is. Can you go dig up some dirt and find out if there's something here that just isn't right, and chase it down. But no, they that's my feeling is, and that's, I'm not saying anything earth shattering. They didn't do their job. They still don't do their job. I always I kind of, I don't have any contacts in that world anymore. I used to, and I used to try and encourage Tony. I'd say let's, because for a while there, when he was in, after the he won the state, and he went to they moved him a few times, federal prisons, and he was able to get me on a list where we could email each other, and It was just faster than sending mail, and if I wrote him anything, they would rip it open and look through it before they gave it to him. And he said, yeah, don't send me anything. They'll just keep it. They'll say it got lost. And so we kept in contact that way. And he was a prolific letter writer, um, and he typed everything, and and a lot of it was, hey, this is what I'm working on now. This is what I found out that the judge did, that Nugent did, and I found this case, and he was like, he worked at it every single day, every single day. Uh, and I would say to him, I'd say, can we get somebody, that I forget what they're called, the freedom, uh, yeah, the Innocence Project. And he said, he's like, I'm not sympathetic enough, an old Italian white guy. And I understand what he's saying. Most of the people that they focus on, and these poor souls, usually poor black men who had no defense, and they've been in prison for like 40 years. Every 6 months, you see another one being exonerated, and a lot of it is it's science based because it's got to do with DNA. And oh no, this guy was never there, at this murder. Let him go, and that's all good and great. And the problem for Tony is that there's no DNA test to show that he didn't do this. It requires, uh, if it's a journalist writing a story, it requires severe attention to detail, and the ability to keep it straight and keep it simple enough that you don't lose the reader. Because I've done this. I'm reading something and it's just like, I can't get through this, and it's just like, well, and it's but then again, I come back to that. Well, maybe that's because we were focusing on the way the feds set it up. They wanted you to talk about it this way, where you're just like rolling your eyes and you're thinking, I don't have time for this. What you're doing is, and I know it's coming late in his sentencing term, and but he never gave up, and I understand better how he never gave up, because it was, as he said, this is really for Dawn, because it's like eventually he's going to get out, and he's kind of out now, but he's still restrained in his activities. But that's going to come to an end, and she's never coming back. Um, I also think that there's a tragicness to Tony's story. I don't know if you knew this. Do you know the story about Katrina Rose? He mentioned her. Okay. Did you know that she and her mother perished out of New York on the TWA 800 flight? Yeah. No, he doesn't talk about it. Tony has had a very, very blessed, and at the same time horrific experiences. They were engaged. That house in Cleveland Heights that he no longer owns, he lost it after he went to prison. Uh, Tried to hang on to it, but they needed money. And again, his father, who was an attorney and argued before the Supreme Court, his father dies while he's in prison. But he was elderly. His father was elderly, but he didn't get to see him. I know his mother was able to make. She's younger. She was much younger than his father, and she could make those trips. But his father couldn't come to see him. I don't think he was ever went to see him. And but Katrina Rose and her mother died in that plane explosion right after it took off from New York. I think from LaGuardia. Um, and that's just something that he never let. Tony is the sort of person who, when people got together with him, uh, everyone was happy. And if you looked glum, he would find a way to make you feel happy, at least for that short time. He would get like a dozen tickets, the cheapest seats you could get for an Indians game, and just tell people, hey, meet me at AJ Rocco's, and if you can make it, I got a ticket for you. I'm not selling it. Just come, and we're going to the baseball game. He would do stuff like that, and then after the game, we'd come back to Rocco's. And he talked about Brendan Walton, and I I work for Brendan right now, and yeah, I told him, I said, I listened to this interview that Tony did with this investigative journalist Brian Douglas. He's doing this, and he said he mentioned you, and he said, what? And I told him, I said, yeah, he was like, how supportive you were of him to let him do, because there were a lot of people that were like, especially at the athletic club, they were like, they were shunning him. Other thing, I mean, I tell you this because I think it's important. It's sort of person that Tony is. And I'm pretty sure that when he mentioned his best friend died while he was in prison, I think that is the brother of Katrina, because he knew these people from a young age. They were in high school. It was his high school sweetheart, and I think her brother, who and I know this was the case, her brother obviously had a really hard time living his life when his mother and his sister were gone. And I think he had he had his own emotional problems, maybe in part because of that loss, and he passed away. I'm not sure how he passed away. So there's that sort of thing. Tony was a few years before everything went kind of crazy. Remember I said he had that office inside the athletic club building. He was coming out. There was a back door that led it to an alley, a little alley that would be between the Halley building and the actual Cleveland Athletic Club building. And it was just a dank, dirty alley. And it came out on Euclid, and it comes out on Huron in the back there. Okay. And he was leaving one night, and these two kids like tried to rob him. And one of them stabs him. And he puts this guy in a headlock and hangs on to him until somebody comes and gets help. And the other kid ran away, but he caught that guy. And I remember I went to see him in the hospital. This was interesting because they fixed him up, but the wound, I didn't know this, was so damaging that it actually injured his I don't know if it was his colon or somewhere along his intestines. And while he was in prison, he got released on a medical dispensation to have the surgery and recuperate, because it somehow it hadn't healed properly, and it was giving him new problems. So that's something that like affected him, happened before he got convicted, and then affected his life while he was in prison. It's like, so you think about this guy, loses the love of his life, his future mother-in-law, gets stabbed. Now he's in prison. Now his gut is probably bothering him, hurting him, and it's just like, and I'm in prison for something that I didn't do. And you saw him, you interviewed him, you see that personality. That's how he is all the time. That's what you get. There's never, if somebody's deserves to be called a piece of shit, he will find a nicer way of saying it, but he won't dwell on it, and he'll just say, you know what, we don't need that kind of person around us. And he's a realist, and if this is possible, he's a realist and an extreme optimist at the same time. So he accepts these things that have come his way, but at the same time, he just doesn't give up. And so when you add on all these things, and then you tack on the loss of someone like Don Pasella, that's just like another thing, you know. And if anybody could be like, well, I'm Job, God, why are you doing this to me? Uh, he's like, no, it's not happening to me. It's happening to the people around me, but you still suffer. And there's very little. I'm sure in the middle of a dark night, there's a little bit of woe is me. That's personal between him and God, but you won't see it cross his lips when he's talking about what he believes is right. So just the chance for people to see what you're uncovering and putting in a different light is exciting. And again, the way he talked about in his hour and a half interview with you was like, wow, this is exactly. He's had a long time to think about it. This is exactly how it needs to be talked about. This is how it needs to be said. And I'm sure that it's probably going to get to the point where his sentence will be fully served before there's any real vacating of a sentence. But I think as long as he's got the ability to keep talking about it and sort of find a way to expose what Casares's hand was in Don's demise, he's going to keep doing it. So I'm happy that he found someone like you that can find that. And hey, you are doing a great service to the citizens of the state of Ohio if there's a way to show Casares for who he really is. That would be great. That would be fantastic.